And welcome back. I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. 7 people are in a critical condition while 6 are in a serious condition after a vehicle drove into a crowd in Los Angeles. The LA Fire Department says the vehicle hit a taco cart before colliding with people outside of a nightclub, with police saying it's too early to currently know if the incident was intentional. Donald Trump has filed a $10 billion lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal, its owners and Rupert Murdoch over a report linking him to Jeffrey Epstein. Wall Street Journal owner Dow Jones says it stands by its reporting and will vigorously defend against the defamation claim. Syrian government forces have deployed in the Druze majority city of Sweda as interim President Ahmed al-Sharaa urges all sides to respect a US-brokered truce with Israel. Sounds of gunfire have been reported in the city as Israel accuses Sharaa of siding with perpetrators. Meanwhile, at least 32 Palestinians have reportedly been killed in Israeli attacks near Gaza food sites, according to local officials. Reports suggest dozens more have been rushed to the Khan Yunis hospital, as the World Food Programme says that thousands are on the verge of catastrophic hunger. President Lula has slammed the US for revoking the visa of a Brazilian Supreme Court judge over what the Trump administration calls a political witch hunt of former leader Jair Bolsonaro. Tensions have flared between the two countries, with 50% US tariffs on Brazil set for August the 1st. US Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard has called for Barack Obama to be prosecuted over the 2016 US election won by Donald Trump. Gabbard accuses Obama and former intelligence officials of a treasonous conspiracy on claims of alleged Russian interference. State media in Iran say that 21 people have died after a coach overturned near the town of Kavar. The incident has also injured dozens, according to the Kavar hospital director. And South Korea's jailed ex-president Yoon Suk-yeol faces new charges over his 2024 martial law declaration. Prosecutors say he abused authority, erased records and blocked arrests during the crackdown. We start this hour in North America. Donald Trump has filed a $10 billion lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal's parent company, Dow Jones, and its owner, Rupert Murdoch. He says they lied by publishing a fake story that claimed he sent a bawdy birthday note to Jeffrey Epstein in 2003. The US president claimed that the publication slandered him and violated libel laws. Trump said the note, which the paper reported he had sent for Epstein's 50th birthday, is fake. He called the article false, malicious and defamatory. The Justice Department has also asked the judge to unseal grand jury materials from the 2019 Epstein case, calling it a matter of public interest. The department is also seeking transcripts from the case against Epstein's associate, Ghislaine Maxwell. Trump supporters are demanding more transparency in regards to the case. Lawmakers from both parties are also backing a move to force the release of more Epstein-related documents. Well, joining us on the programme is David K. Johnston, a Trump biographer who's joining us live from New York. David, thank you ever so much for taking the time to speak with us. Firstly, can I get your initial thoughts on the announcement of this lawsuit? Of course, in the wake of political instability surrounding Epstein and these reported files.
Well, Trump has found that suing media companies which have either non-media interests or need approval of the Trump administration for various transactions has been very lucrative. So far, he's collected about $66 million from them. In this case, however, against Dow Jones and the Wall Street Journal, he's not going to get anywhere because Rupert Murdoch, the controlling owner, was told by Trump directly, if you run this story, we will sue you, and he went ahead. And what that tells you is they have the letter They probably have other documents supporting this. And truth in America in libel actions is a 100% defense. It's a terrible defense to have to bring, but it is a absolute defense.
Yes, David, let's look now at, of course, the ramifications of this. Donald Trump's administration spoke early in their second term about releasing these Epstein files. Fast forward some months and it's now they don't exist. So how bad of a mark is this on Donald Trump? And given the fact as well that even his own supporters, his MAGA supporters, who we know are fiercely loyal, now questioning the president.
Well, this is the first significant crack we've seen within the MAGA crowd, who are about 20% of Americans. That's Donald Trump's base. The effort to unseal grand jury proceedings, which will have nothing to do with Trump. Those were about indicting Epstein, the predator, and Ghislaine Maxwell, his procurer. They weren't about Trump. A judge will no doubt refuse to release them or release most of them, but it doesn't matter. This is a ruse. What matters are the records that were obtained during the search warrants executed at Epstein's properties. These include extensive lists of young women, underage women, by name, who were sex trafficked. It includes people with whom there were over 4,500 wire transfers involving money. Some of them were young women, presumably paid off, and others presumably were men who paid to have sex with underage girls. What we don't know is if Donald Trump is among those men. We know that Trump and Epstein were very close by their own accounts, and we know that Donald has engaged in a number of activities involving young women that weren't criminal but are suggestive. For example, walking in on, by his account, naked 14-year-old girls at a beauty pageant he owned, where he claimed he had the right to inspect the pageant.
David, do you think this could have any impact and influence on politics in the United States? With midterms upcoming, still a little way away, but we have, of course, seen somewhat of a shift in popularity for the Trump administration. Do you think that this Epstein case and conversation could also be a deciding factor when Americans head to the polls?
Well, the polling is a long ways off, the fall of next year. I think the importance of this story will be in whether it keeps going or it dies. If this story has legs, it's very bad for Donald Trump. And the financial records and the apparently photographs and videotapes that Epstein had, according to court records, showing various of his grown male wealthy clients with underage girls would be very damaging. I don't think Trump can survive as president if evidence appears that shows he is a serial child rapist. Now, there's no evidence of that right now. Let me be very clear. Trump hasn't been charged with any crime. But the obvious question is, since you promised you were going to make all of this public and said there are these files, why did you then say, oh, they were created by Obama and Biden, and then say there are no records? Clearly, it's the cover-up that is going to be the problem, and MAGA, even the MAGA crowd, are not going to support someone if there is evidence that comes out that Donald Trump is a repeated child rapist.
David, I want to end by looking at the state of US politics at the moment. Of course, Trump has sort of forged his own journey, potential conversations that he's had in the public domain, often contrasting and potentially conflicting with his story, sometimes changing on topics. I'm thinking geopolitics as well, not just US domestic politics. But do you think this is a new age of politics in the United States, also given the influence of somebody like Elon Musk, who's now announced his own new party? Is this a forward direction that you think we won't be turning back from in regards to top, powerful, rich men in the United States in these positions like president?
Well, you've outlined the key issue here, and that is the American democracy over or can it be revived? Now, I was the first person to write about Donald becoming president, and that was in 1988, 37 years ago. Donald believes that he should run the country and the whole world. In fact, he said that just a month ago, 14 years after I said he believes that. And Donald is right now America's dictator. He hasn't fully consolidated power, but he declared on February 26th that anything he does that he says is saving the country means that it's lawful. He is engaged in a whole variety of behaviors to try and seize total control of the country. He hasn't consolidated all of his power, but I warned people in 2015 that if Trump got to the White House, he wouldn't leave peacefully, and lo and behold, January 6th, the effort to overthrow the government by Donald Trump 4 years ago. So this is a major issue here, whether America will continue to be a democracy or not, whether the rule of law will be extinguished in the United States. And Trump himself has talked about using American troops against American citizens and deporting, as he calls them, the homegrowns. That is, taking people like me who are native-born Americans and therefore citizens and removing us from the country because he dislikes us. And, you know, we will have to see how effective his critics are, whether he continues to have support from Republicans who've knuckled under to him because of the influence in primary elections, that is, party elections for nomination to office. Everyone who has stood up to Trump in a serious way who's a Republican has been voted out in primaries.
Yes, David K. Johnston, thank you ever so much for providing your expertise and insight. We will here, of course, on NewsX World continue to bring you all of the developments in this ongoing Epstein saga. But we stay with the United States partly as Brazilian President Lula da Silva has called a US decision to impose visa bans on officials involved in former President Jair Bolsonaro's trial arbitrary and baseless, saying foreign interference in the judiciary was unacceptable. In a statement released today, Lula said the action violated fundamental principles of respect and sovereignty between nations. This comes as Trump had earlier imposed visa restrictions on Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes. The visa bans were a response to the court's decision to issue search warrants and restraining orders against Bolsonaro, who is accused of plotting a coup after losing the 2022 election. In addition to Moraes, 7 other justices from Brazil's Supreme Court were also hit by the US visa restrictions. Trump has called the case against Bolsonaro a witch hunt. Bolsonaro is on trial before Brazil's Supreme Court on charges of plotting a coup to stop Lula from taking office in January 2023. Bolsonaro has denied that he led an attempt to overthrow the government, but has, however, acknowledged taking part in meetings aimed at reversing the election's outcome. Well, joining us to discuss this situation and the broader ramifications across the Americas, Rupinder Sachdev, an international affairs expert who is joining us from New Delhi. Rupinder, thank you ever so much for taking the time to talk with us. The response that we've had from President Lula, widely expected, but of course this is relations between Brazil and the US are breaking down. Do you think that that breakdown in relations is primarily due to this situation surrounding Jair Bolsonaro? And why is the Trump administration so keen to be a part of that process?
Thank you so much. To a certain extent due to Bolsonaro, but not fully due to that. Remember, Twitter was banned, or there were issues with Twitter in Brazil. And there was a time when, yes, Musk and Trump were good friends. So it goes back to that also. Brazil has imposed restrictions on US technology and digital companies, some of them, right? They are very unhappy with Brazilian regulations. That has been one reason also. Another reason is US agriculture, ethanol, especially exports. So that tends more towards, economics. But yes, regulations and Bolsonaro, of course, and Twitter, the ban on Twitter, which was there. But the big picture is that also that Bolsonaro is a right-wing leader. Lula here is a left-wing socialist leader. He has his own views in terms of how the state should run and be a welfare state. And in Trump's scheme of things, generally they're not happy with countries or nations which are run by socialist leaders. That's one. And especially so in those countries where there is a alternative, strong, somewhat strong right-wing candidate or right-wing leader, like in the case of Brazil. And also, in a bigger picture, the US looks at Latin America, the whole of South America, as its backyard. And now they want to try and ensure that China, which already has, by the way, made many inroads in many Latin American countries, America is trying to, reverse some of that. So reverse the Chinese expansion into Latin America, as well as reverse any left or socialist leaders in Latin America. That is more or less American foreign policy in this region.
Yes, Rabinda, of course, experts have drawn parallels between Jair Bolsonaro's election loss and also Donald Trump's after that, of course, 2020 election and then the following Capitol riots that we spoke about earlier today. Of course, as well, Jair Bolsonaro talking about taking part in meetings aimed at reversing the election's outcomes. Do you think that the US administration might be taking a step too far here in potentially trying to influence a criminal proceeding in a country far outside of its borders?
Sir, the days of, polite diplomacy and, whatever you're planning to do, you do, but you don't, you don't use harsh words. Those days are gone. America now believes, and Trump believes, in using raw power, raw words. So if he thinks, which is what he is thinking right now, and yes, you're right, Bolsonaro was in fact, or is also known as the Trump of the tropics. He is very much like a Trump personality. He's very Trump-utopian. By the way, my book on Trump is out today, so I'm kind of reminded of Trump-utopia. So Bolsonaro is very much a persona with whom Trump has an affinity. So this would certainly have an impact on Brazil-American relations. See, you may push down someone. Let's say America is pushing Lula, America is pushing BRICS, okay, for example, and other countries. Over a period of time, some of these things would backfire on America. But at the present, in the present, it's America's currency which holds, both in terms of the money, the economic power they have. I mean, every country wants to sell to America because that's 25% of the world market economy, this approximately, right? So it's money and muscle power, military power, which America has, and Trump is bent upon using that power. So far, and of course, earlier presidents have also used that power. American presidents have ordered assassinations, even in Latin America, right? Chile, I think, Chile is the famous one. But in all countries, Nicaragua, they invaded. Panama, they've just arm twisted. So, but Panama is Trump now. So previous presidents have also exercised American power, but in a much, much, much less expansive and deeper way. Trump is using a hammer. So he is basically using a sledgehammer. He knows that's the power. So as of now, Trump has it, and he's using it.
Yes, Rabinda Sachdev, thank you ever so much for taking the time to speak with us. We will be across all the developments in Brazil-US relations, but we move away now from the Americas. Qatar's Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Mohammed bin Abdulaziz Al Khalifi, and Donald Trump's senior advisor for Africa and the Middle East, Massad Boulos, held a joint press conference in Doha. They discussed progress on a peace agreement between conflicting parties. Al Khalifi highlighted ongoing international efforts and detailed follow-up mechanisms to ensure compliance. This, of course, relating to a deal that was signed between the Democratic Republic of Congo and the M23 rebels. Boulos emphasised the importance of state sovereignty and acknowledged the complexity of reaching a final agreement. both stressed continued negotiations towards a comprehensive resolution. The deal seeks to end the ongoing conflict between the DRC government and the M23 rebel group. It builds on previous agreements with stronger international oversight. The goal is a lasting peace through clear commitments and follow-up. Let's have a listen to what Qatar's Minister of State for Foreign Affairs and Donald Trump's senior advisor for Africa and the Middle East said in their joint statement.
تنفيذ الالتزام يقع على عاتق طرفي النزاع. فطرفي الإعلان قد اتفقوا على عدد من المبادئ الأساسية التي شملتها بنود الاتفاق، وهذه البنود تخضع لآلية متابعة. وهذا ليس الاتفاق الأول ما بين الطرفين، هناك اتفاقات سابقة، لكن ما يميز فعلا هذا الاتفاق هذه المرة هو المشاركة الدولية الكبيرة التي حظي بها طرفي الاتفاق فيما يتعلق بوضع آليات متابعة مفصلة نستطيع من خلالها رسم تقارير واضحة موجهة للأطراف فيما يتعلق بتنفيذ هذه البنود.
ليس هناك أي حلول سحرية خاصة بما يتعلق بالجدول الزمني. هناك عمل جاد من قبل الطرفين، ومثل ما تفضل معالي من قبل المجتمع الدولي. أحد أهم بنود الإعلان النوايا هي التأكيد على بسط سيطرة الدولة وسلطة الدولة على كامل أراضيها، وهذا شيء طبيعي لأي بلد بغض النظر.
Well, I'd like to thank Maurice Carney, an Executive Director of the Friends of Congo in Washington, D.C., for joining us to discuss these comments, but also the significance of this deal that has been signed between the DRC and the M23 rebel group. Maurice, thank you for your time. Let's first look at that signing, at that deal. We know work has been ongoing to end devastating violence in the east of Congo. What are your initial thoughts after that announcement?
You know, it's a step forward. We have to wait and see what the results are going to be. I would like to say, however, it's not by accident that these peace agreements, these accords, have been signed in Doha and Washington. That gives the audience a sense of what's driving these peace accords, and that is the economic interests of Qatar and the economic interests of the United States. And when those two economic interests are driving a peace deal, that means there are going to be some fundamental gaps, especially as it relates to the concerns of the local population. So this is a very top-level, undertaking. Notice that we haven't seen the Southern African Development Community, the East African Community, the African Union taking the lead. So that's an indication of the priorities around both the Washington Accord that was signed on June 27th between the Rwandan government and the Congolese government, and now the Doha Accords signed between the Congolese government and the M23 militia and the Congo River Alliance.
Yes, and of course looking at international support and monitoring surrounding this situation, how vital is that given the circumstances that many in the east of Congo were having to live in with this violence leading to displacement and countless deaths?
Well, I mean, it's vital. When you talk about international support, we thought Resolution 2773 coming out of the UN Security Council, where you had a unanimous vote, 15-0, on the part of the entire world, calling for very specific actions in an effort to relieve the suffering on the East. For example, Resolution 2773 called for the immediate, unconditional withdrawal of Rwandan soldiers from the Congo, the cessation of Rwanda's command and control of the M23, immediate ceasefire, the opening of a humanitarian corridor. Now, that was very explicit. Now, these two deals, the Washington Accord and the Doha Accord, puts us on a track towards those, but they weren't the priority. They weren't the immediate request. Now, this Doha Accord calls for a ceasefire, immediate ceasefire, So we'll see if that is actually implemented. According to this recent accord, there's a mechanism that has to be put in place in order for that to be realized. So here again, we see questions of peace, questions of justice, questions of sovereignty, territorial integrity being conditional, not unconditional, as we saw in the Resolution 2773 coming from the United Nations on February 25th of this year.
Yes, Maurice Carney, thank you ever so much for joining us and providing that insight. We will continue to bring you all the developments as this ceasefire is enacted. We move on now, though, and the US Immigration and Customs Enforcement is rapidly expanding its migrant detention capacity with a new $45 billion funding boost. ICE aims to increase its detention beds from 40,000 to 100,000 by the end of this year. The agency is prioritising large tents, camps at military bases, including a 5,000-bed facility at Fort Bliss in Texas, as well as sites in Colorado, Indiana and New Jersey. US Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is also seeking partnerships with Republican-led states to build additional detention centres inspired by Florida's alligator Alcatraz. Noem is in talks with 5 states to replicate this model. ICE and the White House have yet to comment on the expansion claims. Moving on now, a tourist boat carrying 53 people was capsized in Vietnam's Ha Long Bay on Saturday, killing at least 3. The boat was struck by strong winds and heavy rainfall after Storm Whipper entered the South China Sea. Rescue teams have recovered 3 bodies and located 12 survivors, but authorities have not released information on the nationalities of the victims and rescue operations are still ongoing. Ha Long Bay, a popular tourist destination, is located around 200 kilometres northeast of Hanoi. The storm has caused significant disruptions, including the diversions of many flights at the Noi Bai airport. Storm Whipper is expected to make landfall along Vietnam's northern coast early next week. And in the latest development from Iraq, authorities have detained 6 local officials and suspended 17 employees, citing clear negligence in an incident. Among those detained are 3 local officials, including the head of civil defence in Qutb. This comes after a blaze killed 61 people in a devastating fire at a newly opened shopping mall in the eastern Iraqi city of Qutb. The blaze broke out last Wednesday at the Corniche hypermarket mall, rapidly engulfing the 5-storey building. The cause of the fire remains unclear, though survivors report an air conditioner explosion on the 2nd floor. Iraq has a long-standing issue with safety standards, particularly in the construction sector, which has led to several deadly fires in the past. The investigation is ongoing, with more arrests possible. Let's now take a look at the latest news from across the continent of Europe. Slovenia has approved a law allowing assisted dying. This brings it in line with a growing number of countries that permit terminally ill adults to end their lives should they face unbearable suffering with no hope of recovery. Nations like Australia, Canada, the Netherlands and Belgium already allow assisted dying, as do some US states. Almost 1,000 firefighters and helicopters battled a wildfire about 40 kilometres west of Marseille in France. The blaze, which spanned 240 hectares, flared up on Friday. Officials reported that cooler temperatures and increased humidity helped improve conditions. This fire erupted just a week after another fire reached the northwestern edge of Marseille. That blaze prompted evacuations, lockdowns and temporary airport closures. Polish authorities are investigating an air traffic system outage. The Interior Ministry said officers are analysing information for potential sabotage. Warsaw's main airport reported initial flight disruptions but later confirmed normal departures, with the ministry adding planes are taking off as usual. The Portuguese government will decide next week whether to replace or reappoint Bank of Portugal Governor Mario Centeno. His 5-year term ends on Saturday. Finance Minister Joaquim Miranda Sarmento confirmed the timeline. Centeno has faced criticism from the right-wing government. They argue that his move from Finance Minister to Central Bank Chief in 2020 undermined the institution's independence. Well, that is all we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more of the latest breaking news from across the world.